I know a lot of veterans are excited about this year's 2026 COLA increase. Don't get me wrong, any raise sounds good when you're living on a fixed income today. I'm going to be honest with you. I don't think this year's COLA increase is something to really celebrate. In fact, I think it's proof the system is still broken. See, every headline, every VA email, every social media post is talking about how we're getting a cost of living adjustment, like it's some kind of win. But let's call it what it really is. It's the VA trying to stop your benefits from falling behind. That 2.5 to maybe 3% increase, it might sound generous on paper, but when you actually break it down, what that actually means in today's economy, it really barely moves the needle. Say if you're 100% service connected, your compensation might go from about $3,700 a month to maybe $3,800 a month. That's a $90 to $110 increase. But when rent's up 12% since 2021, groceries are up 25%, and gas has jumped nearly $1 in a lot of states, that extra $100 doesn't really feel like much progress. It kind of feels like a bandage on a bullet wound. The truth is, these COLA increases were designed for a completely different economy, one where inflation stayed around 2% and basic living costs didn't skyrocket overnight. The formula the government uses is tied to something called the CPIW. That stands for the Consumer Price Index of Urban Wage Earners and Clerical Workers. Long term, but let me ask you this. How many disabled veterans on fixed incomes do you know who are urban wage earners? Exactly. The CPIW tracks things like gasoline, airfare, and household goods, not the things that most veterans actually spend their money on, like medical costs, prescriptions, rent, groceries, and utilities. So, yeah, it's nice that we're getting an increase, but the problem isn't the raise itself. It's the fact that veterans are forced to celebrate crumbs while the cost of living and the cost of surviving keeps climbing faster than our benefits ever will keep track with. That's not winning. That's treading water while the tide just keeps rising. Every October, the same thing happens. Veterans across the country start seeing the headlines pop up on their feeds. VA announces new cost of living adjustment. It's on the VA's website, on every veteran news page, and every social media group starts buzzing about it. And for a moment, you feel like you have a spark of hope that maybe finally the government is throwing us a bone. You start thinking, hey, maybe this is the year I actually see a little bump that helps me breathe easier. But here's the reality. That COLA increase you're hearing about, it's not a raise, it's not a reward, it's not a bonus, and it's definitely not a thank you. It's the government's way of trying to make sure your benefits don't lose value while inflation quietly eats away at every dollar you've ever earned. And even then, it doesn't really keep up. See, the 2026 COLA adjustment is projected to land somewhere between 2.5 to 3%, depending on what the final inflation numbers look like from the Bureau of Labor and Statistics. They use a metric called, the CPIW. Again, it stands for Consumer Price Index for Urban Wage Earners and Clerical Workers. It tracks the changes in the price of common goods and services. But here's the real kicker. That formula was designed decades ago for a completely different demographic than the average disabled veteran today. It doesn't truly reflect what we spend our money on. If you're like most veterans, I know your biggest expenses aren't new cars or airline tickets. They're things like rent, utilities, groceries, gas, and healthcare. And guess what? Those are the exact categories that have skyrocketed far faster than the CPIW tracks. So let's put this into more perspective. So again, you're 100% service connected, let's say. You're currently receiving that $3,700 a month in VA compensation. A 3% COLA increase means you might get a check that goes up by $110. That's it. Now, at first, that might sound decent until you start breaking it down against the reality that we live in. Gas prices, again, have gone up 40% since 2021. And in a lot of rural areas where veterans are actually living, you can't even get to work, the VA clinic, or the grocery store without driving. So the average grocery bill for a family of four, that's been up 25% since the pandemic hit. Rent has jumped between 10 and 20% depending on where you live. And if you're on any kind of fixed prescriptions, say blood pressure medications, antidepressants, diabetes medications, the copays alone have gone up faster than any COLA increase you've ever received. So while that extra $100 might look good on paper, it doesn't stretch like it used to. It's gone the moment it hits your account. You fill up your truck, grab a week's worth of groceries, maybe pay a higher electric bill, and just like that, your entire rate is gone before you even notice it. And here's the part that really frustrates me the most. The way the VA frames it like it's some kind of big win. The press releases are all polished up with language about supporting our veterans and ensuring benefits keep pace with the economy. But when you actually live it, when you're the one watching your grocery receipt hit $200 when it used to cost $120, you realize it's not a victory at all. It's just damage control. The COLA isn't designed to make your life easier. It's designed to make sure your benefits don't fall even further behind. So yes, it's nice to see a bump, but let's not confuse survival adjustments for progress. Because when the cost of everything you depend on outpaces the system meant to protect you, it's hard to call that a win. It's a reminder that the fight doesn't end when you get your rating. It continues every single year you try to stay afloat in an economy that keeps shifting underneath you. So here's the real problem, and it's one most veterans don't even realize until it's too late. If you're paying attention to what the COLA really means, you're falling behind. Quietly, slowly, and consistently. Because, yeah, every January your check might go up a few $100, but you might see an extra 80, 100, maybe even $120 depending on your rating and dependence. But while that number looks bigger, your buying power is getting smaller every single year. That's not an illusion. The government gives you what looks like more money, but in reality, that dollar buys less gas, less groceries, and less stability than it did the previous year. So let me put it this way. If your benefits increase 3%, but inflation runs at 6%, you didn't get a raise. You got a 3% raise cut in real terms. You're working with less purchasing power than before. And that gap compounds year after year. Now multiply that by 5 or 10 years. A veteran who doesn't track their benefits or file for the conditions they developed over time ends up losing thousands and thousands of dollars. Not because they did anything wrong, but because they assumed the VA's adjustments would take care of them. But here's the truth. The VA's COLA increase isn't meant to advance you. It's meant to stabilize you. And stability, stability doesn't keep up with an economy that's sprinting away from the middle class. So if you're not actively reviewing your rating, if you're not checking for secondary conditions or making sure you're getting rated correctly for what you already have, you're not just standing still, you're sliding backward. Every year that goes by without updating your claim is another year your benefits lose value. It's a hidden pay cut disguised as a raise. That's where too many veterans will get stuck. They think that once they've got that 70%, 80%, or maybe 100% permanent total rating, that they're set for life. But life doesn't work like that. Your body changes, your conditions progress, and inflation doesn't wait for anyone. You've got to think of your VA rating like a living document, something that needs maintenance. Just like your car, your health, or your retirement plan, it has to be updated as things evolve over time. Because let's be honest, you earn these benefits through service, not charity. You sacrifice your health, your time, and for many of us, a piece of who you were before we deployed. That means you deserve every dollar you're owed, not a discounted version of it because you didn't know how to navigate the system. On the flip side, veterans who do stay proactive, who take time to review their files, file for secondary claims, and make sure their conditions are accurately rated, they're the ones who don't just survive inflation, they outpace it. These are the vets who figured out that the VA system isn't just about one claim. It's about building the full picture of your whole health over time. Maybe you started with PTSD and now you're struggling with sleep apnea or hypertension. Both are well-documented secondary conditions to that. Maybe your chronic pain has led to limited mobility, obesity, or new musculoskeletal issues. Each one of those can be and should be part of your service-connected profile. The difference between a veteran who reviews their claim every few years and one who never does can be thousands and thousands of dollars per month. And that's not an exaggeration. I've seen veterans go from 50% to 100% by simply connecting the dots that the VA never did for them. That's a life-changing difference. That's the difference between scraping by and finally being able to breathe again, plan a trip, fix the truck, or just stop worrying if the lights are going to get shut off. So if you take nothing else from this video, take this. The COLA increase isn't your safety net. It's the illusion of one. The only way to truly protect yourself from inflation and the rising cost of living is to make sure your benefits are accurate, complete, and up to date. Because nobody, and I mean nobody, not the VA, not Congress, is going to make sure your benefits keep pace with your reality. That part is on you. And if you stay proactive, if you stay mission ready, you don't just survive the system, you will beat it. Let me give you a real world example. And I think a lot of you are going to see yourselves in this story. A Marine came to us earlier this year. He was a tough guy, salt of the earth type dude. He'd been out for a few years and was rated at 70% on paper. That's a solid rating, right? But when we sat down, the first thing he said was, "Hey, I don't get it. Every year they say we're getting a raise, but every year I'm still broke." He wasn't exaggerating. His rent had gone up almost $400 in 2 years. His groceries were up 25%, and he was paying more just to drive to work. Meanwhile, his COLA increase, 75 bucks, that's when it hit him. That so-called raise he was getting every January wasn't keeping up with the real world needs he had. He was treading water, watching his check grow by pennies while his expenses jumped by dollars. So we took a deep dive into his records. We pulled every C&P exam he'd ever done, every note from the VA, every piece of documentation he ever submitted. And right there in black and white, we saw two things the VA completely overlooked. First, he'd been diagnosed with sleep apnea years ago. He'd mentioned it in passing during his PTSD evaluations, talking about how his nightmares and anxiety made it impossible to get a full night's sleep, but no one ever connected the dots. They treated it like two separate issues when medically the evidence clearly showed his PTSD was causing and aggravating his sleep apnea. Second, he'd been dealing with chronic pain from an old service-connected back injury. He was on daily medication, which limited his mobility, and he was constantly in pain. Over time, that chronic pain had pushed his blood pressure through the roof, a classic case of hypertension secondary to chronic pain. But again, the VA never rated it. We helped him document it properly. We gathered the right medical evidence, linked the conditions with current research, and wrote a very detailed next letter explaining how these issues were medically and causally connected to his service. When the new claim was submitted, it wasn't about gaming the system. It was about correcting it. Because for years, this Marine wasn't being underpaid by a mistake. He was being underpaid because the VA never looked at the whole picture of his health. Once those two conditions were properly service connected, everything changed for him. His rating jumped from 70% to 100%. That's not a $90 COLA bump. That's more like a $1,200 a month bump. But the number wasn't the most important part for him. The difference was in his life. That extra $1,200 meant he could finally move out of a cramped apartment and into a place where his kids each had their own room finally. It meant he didn't have to choose between gas and groceries every week. It meant when his truck broke down, he didn't have to pull out another credit card. For the first time in years, he wasn't just surviving on disability. He was living with some breathing room. And here's the thing. It wasn't just some rare case. There are thousands of veterans out there just like him. Vets who think the system's already given up and given them, a system that thinks that it's given them everything they're owed, when in reality, it's a system that's barely scratched the surface. The difference between cost of living and living comfortably isn't luck. It's knowledge. It's understanding how your conditions are connected, how to document them correctly, how to speak the VA's language so they finally listen. That's what we do every single day here at Xterra Health. We bridge that gap. We connect the dots the VA never did, because no veteran should have to celebrate a $100 raise when the truth is they've been owed 10 times that for years now. So here's the thing. You need to know what the COLA actually is and what it may not be. So every January, the number on your deposit changes and it feels like a raise. It's not. COLA stands for Cost of Living Adjustment. It's the government's attempt to keep your check from losing value as prices continue to rise. Think of it like standing on an escalator that's going down, which is inflation, while you're trying to walk up. COLA is the handrail helping you not tumble backward. It's not a staircase for a better floor. Why this matters? COLA is calculated off a price index, that's CPIW. It measures a basket of stuff, but not necessarily the same basket you pay for most, such as rent, groceries, utilities, and meds. If your costs rise faster than the CPIW or faster than the VA's yearly COLA, your real buying power drops, even if your deposit is a few $100s higher. So plain English, suppose your 2025 monthly compensation was $3,700. The 2026 COLA comes in at, say, 3%. Your increase is going to be $111 rounding to the next whole dollar. So your new payment is now $3,811. But if your actual life went up 6%, say from rent plus groceries and gas and utilities, that's like needing $3,700 times 1.06%, right? So that would mean that you need $3,922 just to tread water. You gained $111 from the government, but in real world, you needed $222 more to break even. That's a $111 gap, a hidden pay cut in purchasing power. Bottom line, COLA helps you not drown. It rarely lifts you out of the water, though. So don't treat it as your growth plan. Your actual growth comes from making sure your rating is accurate and complete. Think secondaries, increases on current ratings, dependents, special monthly compensations where applicable. I need you to go do this right now. Grab last year's and this year's numbers, log into va.gov, go to your profile, look at your direct deposit and disability details or your award letters in your files. I want you to write down last year's monthly payment before COLA, and then this year's monthly payment after the COLA increase, and then your combined rating and whether you have dependents listed, like spouses, kids, parents. These things will change the amount. Now you need to calculate your COLA dollars. So to do this, subtract this year versus last year, and that'll be your COLA increase in dollars. Now divide that by last year to see your percent bump. It should roughly match the announced COLA. Now price check your life. Make a quick, honest list of the expenses that actually moved, such as your rent or mortgage, what was it last year versus now, utilities, your average bill then versus now, groceries, pull 3 old receipts versus a recent one, or check bank statements, your gas and transportation bills. So what was your monthly average, your prescriptions, what are your medical copays, your insurance, such as auto, home, health, and then add the differences. If that total outweighs your COLA dollars, your buying power just fell. So run the real raise test. If your cost rose, say, $180 a month, and your COLA added only $110 a month, your real outcome is only $70 a month. That's your signal to reevaluate your claim instead of waiting another year for another increase. So do a quick eligibility audit. It should take about 15 minutes. You need to ask yourself, have any service-connected conditions worsened? More frequency, more severe symptoms, new limitations? Do I have secondary conditions that were never rated? For example, do I have PTSD that's now causing sleep apnea or migraines? Is my chronic pain causing hypertension, or it's causing obesity that's leading to sleep apnea? Do I have rhinitis that's now leading to sinusitis? Do I have sleep apnea that's led to musculoskeletal issues? Musculoskeletal issues have led to radiculopathy. Do I have medication side effects that are causing GERD, erectile dysfunctions, or weight gain? Did my family dependent status change? Did I have a recent marriage, a new child in the family, a college-age dependent, a parent that's now dependent on your care? Do I meet criteria for any special monthly compensation or SMC due to any functional loss or combinations of disabilities? If the answer is yes to any of those, you need to take action. You need to file an intent to file today. That locks your effective date in now. Start gathering treatment notes, sleep study results, blood pressure logs, imaging, pharmacy list, and lay statements describing the frequency of symptoms, severity of symptoms, impact on work and daily life. Next, you need to reevaluate your conditions. Let me be real with you. If you haven't reevaluated your conditions or filed for secondary service connections in the last couple of years, there's a good chance you're leaving benefits on the table. I can't tell you how many veterans come to us thinking they're done. They've got their rating 10 years ago, maybe had a few CMP exams, and figure that's the end of the road for them. But here's the truth. Your VA claim isn't supposed to be a one and done deal. It's supposed to evolve as you do. Your body changes. So your rating should too. Think about it. The body you had when you left service is not the body you've got today. Time, stress, chronic pain, sleep deprivation, they all add up over time. Maybe your PTSD is now triggering sleep apnea. Maybe your chronic pain has caused you to gain weight, and that weight gain has led to high blood pressure or diabetes. Maybe that minor knee injury from your airborne days now causes hip or lumbar back problems because you've been compensating on one leg for years now. All of this matters. The VA calls those secondary conditions, and they're some of the most overlooked opportunities to correct an incomplete disability picture. Secondary doesn't mean less important. It just means the condition was caused by or aggravated by something that's already service-connected. Why? Why do secondary conditions matter more than ever? It's because it connects everything to the bigger picture. Inflation is eating away at everyone's check, right? But the only way to truly outgrow your benefits in real terms is to stay ahead of that inflation curve. It's to make sure every condition that's connected to your service is actually recognized. Because if you're only ready for half the battle scars you walked away with, the COLA increase will never keep you afloat. You'll always be chasing the cost of living instead of getting ahead of it. So common secondary pathways that most veterans will miss, here's where most veterans leave money on the table. They never connect the dots between their primary and secondary conditions. So again, think PTSD leading to PTSD leading to sleep apnea, GERD, hypertension. PTSD affects your sleep cycle, your hormones, and stress response. That constant adrenaline dump messes with your blood pressure, your weight, and your ability to get quality sleep. If you've been diagnosed with sleep apnea, high blood pressure, or GERD, and you're already rated for PTSD, there's a strong medical basis for secondary connection. So you've got chronic pain that led to obesity, which has now led to sleep apnea, diabetes, or hypertension. Listen, chronic pain limits your movement. Limited movement means weight gain, sedentary lifestyle. Weight gain drives inflammation, which aggravates nearly every system in your body. That's a medically recognized causal chain, and it's how a lot of veterans connect conditions like sleep apnea, hypertension, and type 2 diabetes. Now, say you have rhinitis or sinusitis that could have led to sleep apnea. You've got it documented, right? Those are well-known aggravating factors for obstructive sleep apnea. It's not rare. It's just under-documented. Say you've got back, hip, or knee injuries that have led to radiculopathy or sciatica, gait changes. You'd be shocked how many vets have nerve pain, tingling, or weakness in their legs from old spinal injuries that were never rated separately. Or they've developed hip and knee degeneration on the opposite side from favoring one leg for years. That's all compensatable and often secondary to the original injury. What about medication side effects? This can cause new diagnoses. Pain meds, antidepressants, steroids, those all cause weight gain, hormonal imbalance. They can cause GERD or even erectile dysfunction. If the medication is for a service-connected condition, the side effects are compensatable too. The 1 to 2 year rule. You need to know about this. Here's a good rule of thumb. Review your claim every 12 to 24 months. I don't mean refiling every year. I mean doing a full check-in. Look at your current VA rating, then ask, have any of my conditions worsened over time? Have I been diagnosed with anything new? Have I started or stopped medications for service-connected conditions? Has my mental or physical health changed in ways that affect work or daily life? Most veterans don't realize how much their conditions evolve over time until they line them up on paper. It's not until you see all of it together that you realize how much the VA missed the first time around. Real-world example is, I had a veteran recently. He was an old Army MP who'd been rated 60% for years. He hadn't looked at his file since 2017 when he was first rated. When we ended up reviewing it, we found his back condition had worsened, and he had developed bilateral radiculopathy that was never rated before. On top of that, his long-term NSAID use with ibuprofen had caused gastroesophageal reflux and ulcers, classic secondary GERD conditions. We filed updates with proper documentation and medical opinions. The outcome for him, his rating jumped from 60% to 90% with retroactive back pay. That's, again, not gaming the system. That's the system finally doing what it should have done for him years ago. What you should do next? So what I want you to do is get a full copy of your VA claim. You can request it online through va.gov or submitting an FOIA request. It shows every condition the VA has ever rated, denied, or ignored. You need to cross-check your medical reality with your rated conditions. Pull your medical records, the VA, Blue Button reports, the civilian records, highlight anything new since your last claim. New diagnoses, test results, prescriptions, emergency room visits, or specialist notes. Next, you need to identify potential secondary conditions. Ask yourself, did this condition develop because of or get worse because of another service-connected issue? If the answer is yes, document it. Get lay statements, doctor's notes, and medical literature that all count. Next, you need to get medical evidence that connects the dots. This is where we come in Xterra Health. Our physicians are veterans themselves. We write detailed nexus letters that clearly explain the how and the why behind each secondary condition. We don't use cookie-cutter language. We use the VA's own criteria, CFRs, DBQs, peer-reviewed literature, legal precedent to back everything up. Listen, veterans who treat their VA claims like a living document, not a one-time event, are the ones who stay ahead of inflation. They just don't accept the system's first answer. They make sure every piece of their health story is recognized and compensated appropriately. Because every condition that the VA fails to connect is another piece of your life you're carrying alone. You didn't serve to be forgotten. You serve to be seen. So you need to protect your benefits long term. So file your intent to claim now, even if you're not ready to submit. Again, it locks in your effective date so you don't lose months of back pay. And if you need help connecting the dots, that's exactly what we do here at Xterra Health. Again, reach out to us. Free consult and link below. We'll review your records. We'll identify missing links and craft an expert medical nexus letter that turns your story into medical evidence that wins. So here's the bottom line. If you want to make sure your benefits are actually keeping up with the real cost of living, not the one written in a spreadsheet in Washington, then you've got to take ownership of your claim. The VA might adjust your check by 3%, but the world's adjusting your expenses by 10, 15, sometimes 20%. And that gap, that's the difference between struggling and stability, between scraping by and finally breathing again. Don't let the COLA headline fool you. That increase isn't a bonus, it's a correction, and it's barely keeping pace with our reality. What actually moves the needle for veterans isn't the COLA, it's their claim. It's having a complete and accurate disability picture. It's connecting your secondaries, updating or worsening conditions, and making sure that VA sees you for the whole story, not just the one line item they rated 10 years ago. That's where, again, we come in. It's our entire mission to help veterans like you close that gap, the one between what the VA thinks you're owed and what you actually deserve. We'll sit down with you, veteran to veteran, provider to patient, and comb through your records line by line. We'll look for missed connections, overlooked diagnoses, and conditions that were never rated but should have been. Then we'll turn that into a story, your story, into medical evidence the VA can't ignore anymore, because this isn't just about paperwork. It's about recognition. It's about making the system finally acknowledge what your body and your mind have been through and already paid for. Don't settle for that 3% cost of living adjustment when your claim could be worth 30% more. Don't celebrate a $100 bump when you could be earning a $1,000 correction. So go click the link in the description below and schedule your free medical record review today with us. It doesn't cost a thing to find out what you've been missing, right? But waiting could cost you months, even years of back pay that you've already earned. You served your country. You sacrificed your health. You've already paid your dues. Now it's time to make sure your benefits pay you back. Don't wait for next year's COLA to catch up. Take action now while this one is still fresh. Because the truth is, inflation never waits. Neither should you. Before you click away, I want to leave you with this one last thing. Everything we just talked about today with the COLA increase, the cost of living, protecting your benefits, it all comes down to one thing: making sure you're not leaving money on the table. And that's exactly what my next video is about too. Because there's a benefit out there that most veterans have never even heard of. And it's one of the most powerful programs for combat veterans who are rated by the VA and retired from the military. It's called CRSC, stands for Combat Related Special Compensation. If you ever served in combat, hazardous duty, or even training that mimicked combat, and you're drawing VA disability and military retirement pay, this program could be a game changer for you. Here's why. For decades, military retirees were forced to choose between their VA disability pay and their retirement pay. One offset the other. You'd get one check, not both. It was unfair, and it hit disabled combat veterans especially hard. But CRSC changed that. It now allows for eligible veterans to receive both their full-time retirement pay and their VA disability pay tax-free. That's right, no offset, no penalty, no reduction. What's the catch? You have to apply for it, and you have to prove your conditions are combat-related. That's where things get a little tricky, and where so many veterans miss out, because combat-related doesn't just mean you were in a firefight or got hit by an IED. It can include injuries sustained during training exercises that simulated combat conditions, PTSD directly linked to combat operations, injuries from airborne or air assault operations, and even illnesses or injuries caused by exposure to combat hazards like Agent Orange, burn pits, or environmental toxins. Common mistakes that get applications denied, and how Xterra Health can help you build a bulletproof medical justification that links your combat service directly to your conditions. This is one of the few programs that can literally put you hundreds of dollars, even thousands, back into your monthly pay. So if you're a retired veteran, especially one with combat-related injuries or PTSD, you're not going to want to miss this next one. So make sure you hit subscribe, turn on that little bell icon, and as always, stay mission ready.